they're kind of similar. But I wanted to get back to one point that you mentioned, that both for music and for architecture, the point is to create beauty. And there's a thing in architecture that I'm trying to understand and grapple with. And after I have figured it out, I want to make it accessible and understandable to people, which is, these are just my current thoughts. They aren't perfect, they aren't complete,
Okay.
but currently I'm at this point in thinking. And this is how I see it right now. The problem with modern and contemporary architecture is that somewhere in the industrial age and during the Industrial Revolution, the ideas behind designing and creating architecture separated from the more general view of architecture, and they became more philosophical. And with time, this valley became a lot larger, and thinking behind architecture became more and more philosophical and more holistic in thinking, in the way that, okay, this is how we create architecture, this is how we create other objects. The design ideas became more encompassing, not just for one building, but for the objects around us, for the city around us, for the society around us. So they became more and more high in philosophical thinking, and this created a separation from the general public and the architects. And so what the architects created and understood, because they saw the philosophical background for it, was so distant from the general public that they couldn't comprehend it. And it's not that modern and contemporary architecture and all of the isms that were between the two, between the 30s and the 2000s and the current years, it isn't that they don't have their arguments and their thinking behind it. It's not that these styles aren't thought through and aren't trying to give value. It's that the thinking that is behind them is so distant from the general understanding of architecture that it's too different for the general public to understand.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
If you look at a lot of modern buildings, we can see proportions, we can see the lines that guide the ways that the doors and the windows are placed, and the forms. We can understand it, but it's a bit of a snob thing. And I think we talked about this, that we have this high kind of thinking, and we understand these very complex ideas, and it justifies us to create this kind of architecture.
But don't you think that it is sometimes a little bit lazier, because the more classical architecture had all those elements also integrated. So it had the proportions, all these things that only the more educated people understood or even noticed. But it was still created in a way to create a great environment for living or to fulfill its purpose, and to be enjoyable and to highlight beauty. I think all these newer ideas and directions that they take are only keeping some ideologies, some ideas behind it, but they do not invest the time, do not try to make it accessible and understandable. Because, for example, with the what was the name in Barcelona, the thing that you have checked,
The Barcelona Pavilion by Ludwig Mies
the
van der Rohe.
yeah, when you visited that is, as you explained to me, and after that I understood, that it has some very interesting ideas behind it, and the proportions and the management of the different spaces. But still, it's not for the general viewer. It's not an art piece. It's not an interesting thing that you can look around. So I think it's not. I think we cannot use this as an excuse for these modern ideas, because it still is lazy. You can have those same proportions and also try to make it beautiful. What do you think?
Yes, but the problem is that the gap started like 150 years ago, or somewhere around that, when architects saw like, okay, this was the idea, that the architecture that the Industrial Revolution had at the beginning was still the architecture of the Middle Ages, and it didn't represent the time of that era. So it didn't represent the industry, the machine age. So it wasn't contemporary in the way that it was archaic. It felt like in the Middle Ages they would create caves. They would live in the caves. It wasn't the architecture of the time. That was the feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not cool to create in this way, because up until that point in history, every age had its specific social structure, had its specific hierarchies, and architecture represented it. It reflected it. The thing is that architecture always reflects the societal structures, the economical structures of a time and of a country.
Exactly.
And in the industrial age, it wasn't true, because they were creating cars, they were moving fast, they were moving with boats, they were inventing the plane, but they still used the same columns that they used in the Middle Ages. So there was this idea that, okay, architecture has to change, so it represents our times. And then they decided that, okay, ornament is not cool, we shouldn't use ornaments, and we should adhere to this technological and more engineering-centered worldview that the current era represents. And so it started to move in that direction. And as I understand, this was the thing that catalyzed the rapid change in thinking and division between the general public and the architects and their clients.
Oh, okay, but what do you think? Was this really thought through, or because in my mind, I would say that most of it was just functionality and just efficiency. Nowadays, when they are designing new skyscrapers in New York or Tokyo, the fact that all of them look the same, these glass buildings, very easy structure, is this a thought through philosophy, architectural philosophy, or this is just the cheapest solution? You need 300 offices, that's the way to go. This is how much it costs. The company, the shareholders accept this investment. Everybody wants fast and big profits. So this is the cheapest solution. We can house all these people to work in their cubicles, and we are done. The shareholders wouldn't be happy with designing a very ornamental, beautiful stone building of 50 50 levels,
Yes.
which would cost like 300 times more, but it would be a lot more beautiful and would stand there for 300 more years. So I think there is like this efficiency, and the fact that the ownership of a lot of these buildings that are like larger scale buildings are so spread out that no one really feels the incentive to make it something very beautiful and valuable, because it wouldn't be your own either way. So
Yes, and you're completely right. On one part, I recognize the laziness behind it, and a lot of people wouldn't agree with this that it's not lazy. You have to put in the work, but I can see that it's kind of lazy. The other thing, the in the pot of architecture, there are a lot of things mixed in, and in the past century, basically, a lot of ideas were just put in. One of them is that architecture has to represent the current era, and that it should be an effort to represent the current era with it. Then functionality and efficiency and form follows function and these ideas, which are true, and they have always been applied. Like, people didn't create walls unnecessarily, and the form of the house followed the function of the house. Okay, I need a house, I need these kinds of interiors, and I will compose it in such a way. These are true, but when you put in ideology, and when you put in the climate thing, that there is climate change and it's a crisis, and we have to be very careful with the resources that we have. In some ways, these are good ideas. That, okay, we shouldn't waste resources. We shouldn't use too much things to construct something, like unnecessarily too much things. But it got to a point where it influences design in such a way that you just use the most available, most easily usable things, and that's it. And when you look at the skylines of the major cities around the world, it's almost the same. None of these skyscrapers are characteristic, and you just see the same thing. There are some, the Empire State Building, the Burj Khalifa. I think there's one in Hong Kong as well. But yeah, these are the exceptions. But there are thousands and thousands of skyscrapers that just look the same. The only difference between them is that if it has a circular or cylindrical base, what are the radiuses?
Exactly, exactly. And there are a few
So
funny ones, a few funny shapes, and
yeah, like this cucumber.
like the cucumber in Barcelona.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.